Hi, it's Mike, the Erudite DM, and I wanted to make a video about a topic that's close to my heart because I think it's overlooked unfairly, and I think it's one of the more fun parts of the game if you treat it right. And that part of the game would be travel. Um, I'm not about telling anyone how to play their game or you should be doing it my way. Whatever's fun for you, whatever's fun for your players, do it that way and have a good time. Go in peace. It's all good. But in this video, I wanted to talk a little bit about, and of course, I'm playing Shadowdark. So I'm talking about Shadowdark and how we use travel in Shadowdark. And before I get into travel and inspirations, I have to tell you, I'm a little bit of a Dr. Frankenstein in that I take ideas and inspirations from other rule systems. And I'm sure, I mean, I know some of you do as well, especially if you homebrew and come up with little workarounds at your table, tables or shortcuts or tips for things that you like better or mechanics in the way that works. So one of these supplements that I use quite often is Ben Milton's fantastic Knave second edition, Knave 2E, which I think came out a little over a year ago. And I got my hard copy. I did not do the Kickstarter, but I got my hard copy and my PDF. And looking through it, it's a very interesting OSR system. The players have a lot of agency, but there's also tons of rich information here for a relatively rules light game. There's tons of rich information and tables of how to run your game. It is not just a dungeon delve. And by the way, neither is Shadowdark. I don't know how that myth ever got started with Shadowdark. I guess it was all about the torch timer and people got carried away with the torch timer. It's a fantastic mechanic. But you know what? The torch timer mechanic can also work at midnight on a moonless night in the deepest forest, right? Or in other settings, outdoor settings, in the darkness. So it's really not just a dungeon delver, and neither is Knave 2E. There are a lot of fantastic tables for developing your story and your adventure. So a little bit like Shadowdark is great for a GM who wants to do a little bit of prep, but you don't want to pre-write everything and pre-plan for every contingency or possibility the players may pursue in their adventure. The rules are set up to where you can make the adventure right there at the table by going from table to table and following the flow of the game and the tools provided to you within Shadowdark or Knave 2E. So I'm going to talk about travel a little bit here. You know my feeling. I think travel is exciting. We can all quote examples, Conan the Barbarian, Elric of Melniboné by Michael Moorcock. The first book or two take place in a city with Elric, but after that, he's pretty much going through the I forgot what they're called, the Unbidden Lands, the Forgotten Lands, or Forgotten Realms, whatever they are. Those names all start to run together after a while. But he goes off in adventures and starts out as a powerful king and becomes a nobody while he's, figuring out this battle between law and chaos. But it's mostly a travel story through these books. And then, of course, Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. I mean, there's so much travel there. So what I say to players and other GMs is travel is only boring if you make it that way, right? And most people make it that way and they skip it and they hand wave it because they're not confident, they're not comfortable, and they don't have a couple of simple rules to work around to keep it moving and keep it interesting. I would agree. If all you're doing is going from hex to hex and rolling for wandering monsters, yeah, that sucks. Nobody wants to do that. That's not fun. Any more than wandering around a dungeon that doesn't have traps or a mystery or interesting monsters or encounters, right? Or obstacles. Wandering around a dungeon like that and all you're doing is rolling for wandering monsters, that would be boring as well. So I think if more players had some parameters and maybe some help for how to organize travel, I think that would be great. And Knave 2E does that. And I don't want to jump into that just right away. I want to talk a little first about Shadowdark. So let's start there. And let's see if you can see the whole page here. This is page 90 from the Shadowdark core rules on overland travel. So I use the same system in my game, whether it's solo or playing with friends. I use, you'll see, I don't know if you can see my mouse on here, travel per day. Hexes are 6 miles. So I use 6-mile hexes and a regular walking pace. And there are things that affect that walking pace. I will say that they can travel 2 hexes a day walking. Could you push it further and risk exhaustion possibly? Yes, you could. There aren't rules for exhaustion and some of these other things in Shadowdark. However, it's kept pretty light. So now I understand in the Western Reaches expansion, Kelsey Dion works over this part of the game, the overland travel, and she makes some additions and some changes. So I'm really excited. Did do the Kickstarter for that one, and I'm excited to see how these new rules work out this expansion. But I use this overland travel scale whether I'm playing with friends or I'm playing the solo version called Solo Dark, which I'm not sure, but I think you can still download those from the Arcane Library's website for free, which is great. Can't beat free. So let's look at a few of the mechanics here in overland travel. Turns and time, the game moves in initiative order as normal while traveling overland, and groups often travel in chunks that comprise several hours. You can, what I call, telescope time. You can make a couple of quick rolls and decide that, hey, the morning passes, 1 or 2 rolls, there's no encounters, et cetera, et cetera. Everything is not literally played out hour by hour. That would make, a week long or a 3-week long caravan trip, excruciatingly boring and painful. And nobody wants that kind of game. So what did I want to say? There was something about travel I wanted to throw in here before I went into too far into Shadowdark. Okay, let me stop here before I go further with overland travel. A couple of things, and I think I'm going to put these in a separate PDF and put them up on my website, which you can find easily at eruditedm.com, eruditedm.com. And I've got some free supplements, monsters, putting up some little mini adventures and things that, hey, go grab them, take them. There's also some paid stuff, but you can get these for free. So I think I'm going to put up a little 2-pager of my interpretation from Knave 2E, a couple of other influences like the Perilous Wild and Into the Weird and Wild, and maybe a few others that I like. And I'm going to come up with some simple things that will make your travel more interesting. But before we go back to overland travel, the thing I wanted to say was organizing your journey before your party leaves. Let's say you're in a town. So you're going to go 2 days away to another town. A couple of things. You have to know what kind of journey this is. It's a 2-day trip. We know that. Is it on a road? Is it passing through another village or town? In Europe, typically what happened to avoid bandits and banditry, especially overnight, wherever there was a crossroads or a good spot between 2 towns to protect travelers, think of the Canterbury Tales, to protect these people on their route, little inns, country inns sprang up and other things, a blacksmith for the farmers around that community, and other businesses sprang up. And that's where you get little hamlets, and then they grow into villages and towns, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to know, hey, are we going to overnight in this town here? You need to do some planning, and the players really need to take charge of that. And I think that's a good thing because it becomes their game. It's not just the GM directing everything. So know about your trip. Is it through a cultivated or civilized area where you're relatively safe? There might be bandits and other mundane threats, but you're probably not going to be attacked by a dragon or by a lich lord on the side of the road at night, or a crazy wizard, flinging fireballs from the woods, probably. So, know what kind of trip it is. Or are you traveling further than 2 days and it legitimately is across the mountains or down south into more tropical jungles? There are no roads, there are no paths, because all that's going to affect your party's planning for this trip. Okay. And here's what I would suggest, just a couple of things before we get back to overland travel. Think about the basics. Okay. How much food do you need to take? How much water do you need to take? Where are you going to get, if you're traveling mounted travel with horses and pack animals, et cetera, how are they going to be fed? We would probably call animal rations forage or feed, right? So you need to do a little bit of planning for that and understand the trip, what kind of trip it is. I don't want to beat that one to death. Sorry. The other thing I wanted to say about planning is maybe giving the players some ownership and letting them decide some things. Maybe have someone who's going to be the scout or the guide, right? Maybe call that person the navigator, right? That's the person who's watching the path we're on, who's plotting out the journey, who's watching the countryside as it changes, maybe has a map, maybe they don't. This would be great for a ranger or a druid, but a lot of different types of players and classes could fulfill this role in your game. So think about how you're going to do that. Is there going to be a guide or a navigator? And they'll be responsible for plotting the course, making sure you look out for dangers ahead and behind, and avoid ambushes on the road, things like that. And then you're going to need a quartermaster. That would be the person to say, okay, let me figure out, do a little quick math here. How much water do we need to take? How many rations for us? A little bit extra, forage for the horses and the ponies, et cetera, et cetera. That's an important role. So a scout, a navigator, kind of the same role. The quartermaster, you might have somebody who's specifically taking care of the animals, so find some roles, let them decide who's going to do what. And we'll come back to this idea when we get to Knave 2E, and you'll see where it makes sense for the players to take some ownership. And suddenly they might be a little more engaged and have some more fun as you're traveling. So back to overland travel. Sorry I took so long with that. Skipping around here on turns and time. This is really important when you do check for monsters. And again, remember, I'm using a hex map in my games. So each hex is 6 miles. If I'm walking, I'm going 2 hexes a day. If I'm riding, and for the most part, it's mounted travel and maybe wagons, I'll let them go 3 in a day. And there are some rules for pushing it a little further out and encountering fatigue or exhaustion. And I'll talk about where you can find those or how to make your own for that matter. But the first thing you need to know is the area they're traveling through. Is it unsafe? Is it risky? Or is it deadly? Because in Shadowdark, and I think this is a great part of the rules here, based on the area you're traveling through, you are going to check for encounters, not what we used to call wandering monsters, because there's all kinds of encounters. An encounter can be, and again, we'll touch on this in Knave 2E, but it could be you encounter an abandoned hunter's cabin. You find a bubbling spring with a fresh water supply just a little ways off the road. You find a wagon of pilgrims that have been slaughtered, and there's corpses 2 days old on the side of the road, blood everywhere, soaked into the ground. They've been stripped and robbed, and maybe there's clues. Do you stop to figure out who did this? Do you look for survivors? So another encounter might be, it could be an attack. It could be a monster, and it could be a mundane attack. It could be a wild boar, leaps out of the woods or out of the savannah, out of the tall grasses, and comes barreling down at the party at a moment's notice. It could be, spiders in the woods, or it could be human activity like banditry. It could be a traveling merchant. The list goes on and on and on. And there's a lot of tools for this within Shadowdark, but also in Knave 2E that are really exciting. We talk about light in Overland Travel of Shadowdark on this page 90. If needed, determine how much time remains on the current light source by rolling a die 6 times 10 minutes. I don't know if I like that much because I'm not going to get into that kind of thing. But before I leave the town for that trip, I am going to look at what season of the year it is, right? What are the weather conditions? Because that's going to affect my rate of travel. I might even get really geeked out and look at the cycle of the moon, assuming we're in an Earth type setting with, one satellite moon, and it's got similar lighting features like our moon does. Is it a crescent? Is it a full moon? Is it a new moon and it's totally dark at night? Again, you're back to if you're camping out, campfires and torches and that kind of thing. You get the idea. So we talked about travel per day. The PCs can travel for up to 8 hours a day. And if anything beyond that, you're going to have to take con checks. And you can see this chart here for crossing hexes. And Shadowdark lays out some basic rates for you. But your GM's going to own this. They're gonna set it up for you, and they're probably going to have a few pre-planned encounters ahead of time worked out that are either, like we said, features, things you discover, or people and monsters you encounter, right? Okay. Navigation. PCs in unfamiliar territory must have the navigator make an intelligence check upon exiting a hex. On a failure, the group moves into a random adjacent hex. Okay, and that's how you get lost. So you can roll a die 6 and pick which direction you went in. And we'll talk later on about a way to get back on track, because we don't want them getting too far lost and off the path. They probably would figure that out relatively quickly. Well, certainly within a day, I would think they would start to suspect they're on the wrong route. Food and water. PCs can go 3 days without consuming a ration. I probably wouldn't. I'd probably tighten that up a little bit. After 1 day without food, maybe a con check. 2 days without food, you're going to start having problems. You can make it 3 days without food. You're just not, your fighting ability and capabilities are going to be diminished. Your movement rate is going to slow greatly. Really you need water, but you need food also. So, and you can see some of those rules. So this is really, in the original core set, all you really have to work with. So I looked at all these other rule sets, and I may visit those in some other videos, but I'm going to flip on over here. Let's change gears and let's go to Knave 2E and talk about what Knave 2E proposes for travel. If I can figure this out. Okay, there's the whole page. This is page 9 of Knave 2E. I apologize. That is weather. Let's go back a page. Traveling. Okay, this is the first mechanic they use, is one that I really, really like and I think is a lot of fun. Okay, and it's called watches. So what Ben Milton created here is, while traveling, days are divided into 6 4-hour watches. 3 for day, 3 for night. Most major actions, traveling, foraging, searching, etc., take 1 watch to complete. Okay, so interesting idea. The other thing I would do before I ever left town is I'd ask the players, hey, I'd take a 3x5 card, or however you want to note it in your game, and I'd make a little notation. I'd break up the hours of the day into 4-hour increments, and I would mark the characters. I'd have them decide, right? I'd also let them take over some of the roles about encounters and maybe move it around the table, which is a fun way to come up with, maybe you have a marker or some little icon or a miniature or a toy or a special die, and it moves from person to person, either clockwise or counterclockwise around the table, and that person gets the next random roll, right? That way they're all involved. They're all paying attention. Travel speed. PCs can move 1 6-mile hex per watch. That's in line with what Shadowdark does, because it said 4 hours per hex on a walk, up to 3 times per day. Each watch they travel after the third deals 1 direct damage to each PC. We're not going to worry about that, although it does require a con check. We are going to worry about the con check. We're not going to get into hit point damage at this point. Ben suggests that speed at that point is halved in darkness or difficult terrain. Even if you're on a road, I've been down some roads, I'm sure you have in your life too, on foot. I've never been on one on horseback that are really difficult to move around. Could be through gullies, it could be mountainous, it could be through woods, which are little more than just a glorified footpath that even on horseback is difficult to move down. Remember, this is a fantasy medieval world. They're not highway crews. The Romans haven't come through and put in improved roads. Nobody is going down these roads except maybe the locals, and occasionally picking up a tree that was felled or got old and hit by lightning or something. So any kind of obstacles like that are not really tended to. So a lot of things can slow down your travel. Let's go to navigation. If the terrain or weather while traveling is disorienting, the GM may require a wisdom check of the party's leader or the navigator, so that you can decide if you actually get lost. You'll see if they move to a random adjacent hex, right? Unplanned. Exploring, the party can spend a watch exploring around the area of one hex, that 6-mile hex, to reveal any areas of interest, points of interest, as we call them, I believe, in Shadowdark, right? And I'm all about point crawls. I like to plan out a few key encounters I thought about and make up an NPC or two and have that waiting, a quick situation that I think will be really fun to play out. I like to have a couple of those waiting, and they're basically going from one to the next, to the next. And if the game's bogged down too much or too slow, I can always throw them, one or two of them, overboard and not use them and save them for a rainy day or another session. So I've got a little bit of prep, but I can also go into my Shadowdark book and come up with something just like that, based on the biome or the terrain type, and season and weather and all that good stuff. Secret features such as a buried treasure or a hidden door into a mountain should have corresponding clues revealed by exploring the hex. These can only be found by the PCs interacting with the game world. How do you interact with your game world? Well, you're going to look for clues. You're going to find things. I hate to say it, animal scat, animal tracks, maybe fey creatures or some other creature, talking raven in the woods. There's all kinds of ways for you to get information in your world without just, doing some sort of data dump or lore dump for them. And of course, the one I love and the one we use a lot in Shadowdark are rumors. So anytime they encounter another party, and of course they may not be adventurers. I don't even like the term adventurers. I don't think that's a realistic thing, professional adventurers. And I know it's realism, right, in a fantasy game. I just think events in your setting conspire to bring a group of people together on a mission, Lord of the Rings style. They don't do this for a career, in my mind, unless they're a mercenary company. There can be other reasons. So that's a Mike thing. We can argue about that in another video too. But so they're moving from town to town. They're interacting with people that are traveling. They're interacting and stopping at the local farm. They can see something a mile off the road. Let's go that way for a while, see if they've got water and food. We can pay them for it. Maybe a night's lodging in the barn or in the loft. Anything's better than sleeping out in the open air, especially if it's in one of these dangerous areas or even risky areas, because then the person on watch is going to be checking more frequently for something dangerous, something you don't want to encounter in the dark in your sleep. Moving on, we go to foraging, which is finding food. That also takes a watch and requires passing a wisdom check with modifiers for weather, terrain, etc. On a success, player character collects D6 rations. Well, that sounds fairly easy, right? You're going to roll a D6. You're going to spend a 4-hour period foraging. And I wouldn't just be foraging for the animals. We're also foraging for food for us to eat, maybe finding, as it says, more rations that we can use. And I think Ben's system, when he says rations, he's combining fodder for the animals, forage for the animals, as well as food for the players, and maybe throwing water in there as well. And then he uses a travel hazard die at the end of each watch. each person's watch, that's going to be, what do we say, 6 times a day, 6 4-hour watches. You're going to roll a travel hazard die and apply that result. And of course, you can make up as many of these as you want and alter this table. But let's go through them real quickly. Number 1 is an encounter. The party has an encounter usually rolled from a table designed for the region or type or terrain type. Now, you can use that straight from Shadowdark. But if you also have Knave 2e, there's some great tables and all kinds of really flavorful encounter ideas there, as there are in other systems as well. The GM determines the encounter's reaction, activity, distance from the party, if they are surprised, those kind of things. Like you would normally do in D&D or Castles and Crusades or, on and on and on. Most tabletop role-playing games would work that way. On a roll of a 2, we encounter a fatigue problem. Each party member takes 1 point of damage unless they spend the next watch resting. Now, I don't know if I'd use that 1 point of damage thing. Again, that's a Knave 2e mechanic. You may say, hey, they had a really long day. They're not getting enough sleep for whatever reason. Wear and tear, or maybe you reduce their constitution by a point temporarily, or their strength. I don't know. That you can come up with probably a half dozen ways to create some fatigue or exhaustion rules at your table, and they're all over the place on the internet. So you can look for all kinds of ideas, then come up with one that works for you and your players agree to. Don't surprise them with any of this. On fatigue, he also says damage may be higher in severe weather or difficult terrain, but ignore this result while resting. So interesting. Number 3 would be depletion. Roll a die 6 for each perishable item. On a 1, it has gone bad. So just an off chance that maybe, hey, something wasn't that fresh, the berries aren't edible the next morning, or the meat we killed a rabbit and skinned it and had it, but it was no good the next day, that kind of thing. Number 4 is a travel shift. The weather changes, or a local event begins. Interesting ideas. Number 5 is a sign. The players find a sign. Wasn't that a song in the 80s? I saw the signs, or 90s or something. So the players find a sign that a random encounter is nearby. The next time an encounter is rolled in this hex, the PCs meet the creature. Alternatively, reveal a clue to something hidden. So interesting idea, basically a clue so they can use some of their intelligence or wisdom checks to learn more. And then number 6 is free. It's a free pass, no effect. And again, you could take this die 6 and use it any way you want, but you see how you can quickly come up with some, an evolving story on even just this 2-day trip. You don't need to fill up every hour. You don't need to fill up if you use the watch system, you don't need to fill up, the whole morning or the whole afternoon. You could say, hey, make some quick rolls. Nothing happens all morning. You're moving along. The weather starts to change a little bit. You can play this by ear. So when people say that travel is boring, I'm sorry, travel is not boring. You're boring. And I mean that in a friendly way. It's the fault of the GM or the DM for not doing a little homework and coming up with a fun, interactive system that you can all use at the table to make travel more interesting. So that's all I really wanted to say for today. I just wanted to show you that dipping into another system is okay, perfectly fair. Take some of these ideas from Knave 2e, if you like, and import them into your Shadowdark game. It makes a better game all the way around. If you like the things I'm talking about, and I'm new to this, as I've said in all my other videos, I think this is about only my 3rd or 4th video, and I'm new to Restream as well. But, if you like what we're doing here, please like the video. The routine, right? Subscribe, tell others about it. We want more subscribers. And do visit my website, because I have some paid products there. I'm actually doing a zine. And the first zine actually is on the website now, and I will do maybe a second version or even a third when I need to do some edits. I had it pretty closely edited, though, by some friends, other people I play with, Tim and Vance and Flint and so forth, Paul Turner. They all took a look at it, and So if anything's wrong, I'm not blaming them at all. They did a great job and were doing me a very friendly favor. So thank you to all of them. But the first zine is called Warhorse, and it is about mounted travel, as you may guess. It introduces stat blocks in Shadowdark for a heavy warhorse, a destrier, a courser, which is a medium warhorse, ponies, draft animals, mules, roundseys, which is a general purpose horse, not trained. Specifically training a warhorse takes a lot of time and a lot of money and people that knew how to do it in our world, in our history. And we're kind of, borrowing from that for our fantasy game. So there is also a new class in there, a Knight Lancer, who is not a paladin with spellcasting, but he is specifically a mounted knight trained with a lance that can engage in the jousting rules I present in the zine. The jousting rules, which are for field jousts, which is you encounter another knight, you extend pleasantries and so forth, and then you go into a tilt for 3 rounds. That's assuming you have enough blunted lances and someone to serve as squire if you don't have a squire, right? So those rules are in there. It's just I've always felt that mounted travel and horse travel, even wagons, any kind of travel always got short shrift in D&D in the old days. And even today, here in 2025, I think a lot of people just hand wave it because they're not comfortable and they don't have a system they can use, excuse me, easily at the table. So I didn't want to do that because I think it can be really fun. So the first zine you'll find on my website is called Warhorse. The second zine will be out here in time of recording. We're in May 2025. So hopefully before North Texas RPG convention up in Dallas in first week of June, hopefully before then I'll have the second zine done, which is called Saints of the Shadowdark, and introduces good saints and bad saints, more patron saints. There's all kinds of tables for all kinds of church and ecclesiastical, lawful and chaotic and neutral deities straight out of Shadowdark. So you're familiar with some of this already. And both of these zines, Warhorse and Saints, also have their own one-shot. You're talking about a total PDF document, PDFs only right now, of somewhere around 50 to 60 pages, I believe. I think we're right at 48 pages on Warhorse, and Saints may be a little bit more or a little bit less. So, well under $10. So check it out on my website, and you can get to my website at eruditedm.com. So check it out. Email me at eruditedm@gmail.com. My name is Mike. I've been playing a long time, but I took a little break from the mid-'80s to about 2023. It did not play any role-playing games in that intervening area. And when I did get back into it, Shadowdark was coming on the scene. But I looked at others. I looked at Cairn. I looked at Knave, some other rules light systems. I never really looked into Pathfinder. I'm interested in Pendragon, Castles and Crusades, Adventure of Conquer King 2. And some other systems. So, always learning, always excited to learn more. And I like some space games as well. So I hope to talk with some of you. Let me know what you're thinking. Please post some comments or questions here. If you don't like my ideas, hey, man, it's a hobby. We're having fun here. Stick me with a spear, whatever. That's okay too. We can still be friends and play the game. It's all cool. But I'm okay with discussing other points of view. And I encourage that if you have other ideas, whether you love it or hate it. So all good stuff. Hey, thanks for jumping on. I'm sorry I'm a little long-winded. I think as I do these more frequently, I will talk less and be more to the point. So I hope to see you soon. Thanks for joining me.